Lesson 20. Students solve equations involving red and green number cubes, as well as pawns of one color on both sides of the equation. So we're going to be using all of our strategies that we've learned up to this point to start solving longer and more complex problems. But you'll notice that the pawns on each side of the equation for this lesson are going to be the same color. So I'm going to start by boxing in my numbers that do not have X's with them, because then I know that those are number blocks. Everything else is a pawn. So I'm going to have 3 blue pawns and a red 1 because it's a negative, and then I'm going to have a negative 10, and I'm going to have 2 blue pawns. So when I have pawns on both sides, I always start on the side that has the fewest number of pawns, because remember, my goal is always to get pawns on one side and numbers on the other, not have both on either side of the equal sign. So this side has 2 pawns, this side has 3. So I'm going to start on the side with the least, and I'm going to pull them down. If I pull down 2 on this side, I have to do the same thing on the other side. Now remember, there's no subtraction signs here, so I'm not taking them totally off. I'm just sliding things down so that I can make this problem up here simpler. Now I've got 2 of the same color block here. I've got a negative 10 on this side and a negative 1 on that side. So these 2 together combined have to equal a negative 10. And I'm adding. So I can ask myself, what number plus a negative 1 would give me a negative 10? If you remember back on lesson 16, we talked about when we add number blocks that are the same color, we just add them together and we take the sign of whatever is representative of those numbers. In this case, these are both positives. Over here, if I have a 10, a negative 10, and a negative 3, I just add them together, 13, and I take the sign that's associated with both of them because they're the same color. So this is negative 13. Negative 13 right here, positive 13 right here. So I need to think of a negative number that when I add 1 to it will give me a negative 10. And that would be negative 9. Negative 9 plus negative 1 would give me a negative 10. So this blue pawn is a negative 9. Sometimes when kids start algebra on these hands-on lessons, they always think that the X value has to be positive and that the star or the white pawn has to be negative. And that's not true. It's just that together they have to be opposites. So in this case, if X is a negative 9, if they would have asked us what the white pawn was, we would say it's the opposite of negative 9, which would be positive 9. And in that case, together they would equal a 0 pair. But they're not asking us that here. I just wanted to mention that because that's a common misunderstanding that kids have. X can be negative or star can be negative. So now I have to figure out what my check is. Everything is negative here, so I just have to combine all my negatives. I've got negative 10 right here, plus a negative 9 is negative 19, plus a negative 9 is going to be negative 28. So on this side I have negative 28. Over here, negative 9, negative 18, negative 27, plus a -1 is -28. So my check is -28 equals -28. Problem number 2. You can see in this problem, I'm going to be using white pawns on both sides. And I'm going to have number blocks that are different colors. I'm going to have a red one and I'm going to have a green one. But again, I'm adding. So I'm just going to be putting what they have on there on each side. So 2 white pawns plus a -5 block is equal to a 2 block plus a white pawn. Now, for right now, what I want to focus on is the pawns. And I want to ask myself, which side has the least number of pawns? It's the right-hand side. So I'm going to slide that pawn on down. If I slide that pawn down, I have to slide this pawn down. So now my problem is some number plus a -3 has to equal a +2. Some number plus a -5 has to equal a +2. Well, this would really be much easier for me to solve if that 5 wasn't there and I could just see what one of these things was equal to. This is kind of throwing a loop for me. So I'm going to want to slide that red pawn down. But my rule says if I slide a red pawn down on this side, I have to slide a red pawn down over here. And I don't have a red pawn. But I have a strategy. And my strategy is I can always add 0. I'm going to dump some 0 on this side. But my 0 is going to look, part of it's going to look like this. So I'm going to make a 0 pair, 2 blocks, opposite colors. One of them looks exactly the same as this one, and I'm going to add this 0 over here. Now I have a 5 block I can pull down that looks exactly like this 5 block. It's a -5 block. And now when I look at what I have up here, this is so much easier. I know that 1 white pawn is equal to a 2 and a 5. So 1 white pawn is equal to 5 plus 2, which is 7. Yay, I got that done. To do the check, however, I have to move everything back up and I have to see what I have when I move everything back up. So this is still 0 when I move it back up. So I'm just going to set that aside because it's nothing. And I'm going to look at what I have right here. This says that my white pawn is 7. So this is 7, this is 2, that makes 9. On this side, each of these is worth 7. So 7 plus 7 is 14, and then I have to add a -5 to that. And 7 plus 7 plus -5 is going to give me 9, a +9. So my check is 9 equals 9. Next problem. I can see that I'm going to have white pawns on both sides, and here's my number block. My number blocks are right here. I'm going to be taking away something from these white pawns. So I want to use that strategy that I had previously. I have 4 white pawns, and I'm going to take away a -2. But right now I don't have a -2 there. So I have to use my strategy of adding 0 pairs. Here's my 0 pair. I'm going to add the whole pair to the left-hand side because that's where my -2 is that I have to take away. Now, I'm taking it away, which means I take it off, and it does not come back. Now I'm going to set up the other side. I have a -8, which is red, and I'm adding 2 white pawns. There's my 2 white pawns. So I've got numbers and pawns on both sides of my equal sign. That's confusing to me, so I want to make it simpler. When that situation occurs, I look at my pawns and I find the least number of pawns and I pull all of them down. If I pull 2 down on the right, I pull 2 down on the left. Now my problem is simpler, but I've got this gnarly block right there. I wish I didn't have that block, so I'm going to slide it down, which means if I slide a 2, which is positive, down on this side, I have to slide a positive 2 down on this side. I don't have one. What do? Well, I can make a 0 pair. A 0 pair is a red and a green block together. So I'm going to add that 0 to the right-hand side, and I'm going to slide that 2 down. Now you can see I've taken down the exact same thing from each side. Now when I look at my problem, it is much, much easier. I have 2 pawns equal to a -10 because -8 plus -2 is -10. And these are white pawns, so they're going to be negative because the blocks are negative. So I ask myself, 2 times what would equal -10? Well, I know my doubles for 10, and that's 5. So -5 plus -5 is equal to -10. So each of these has a value of -5. -5 plus -5 is -10. Now to do my check, I have to move everything back up. Doesn't matter where I put these white pawns. Since this is 0, I'm going to pull that out of there. Make it a little simpler. And remember, these are -5. So -5, -10, -15, -20. And then I have a +2. So -20 and +2 is -18. Over on this side, I have -5, -10 plus -8 is going to give me -18. So looks like I have the correct value for my white pawns. Each white pawn is a -5, and my check is -18 equals -18. Last problem for the new work. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to box in where my numbers are, and I'm going to see that I'm using blue pawns on both sides this time. So I have 5 blue pawns on the left, and it says I'm going to take away a red 10, a -10. I don't have one. So I'm going to use my 0 pairs to add one, and now I have one that I can take away. Gone. So now I'm left with 4 blue pawns and a green or a +10. On the other side, I have 2 blue pawns and I have a -2 block. There's my -2 block. Pawns and numbers on both sides. Where do I start? The side with the least number of pawns. Pull all those down. Pull the same number down on the left side. Now I've got pawns and blocks. I would like to just have pawns over here. So I'm going to pull that block down. Now I just have pawns there, But if I pull a 10 down on this side, I have to pull a 10 down on the other side. So I'm going to create a 0 pair, and I'm going to add it to the side where I need it, because if I pull this down on the left, I have to pull one down on the right. So it goes on the right. Now I have a negative 12 on the right, and I have 3 blue pawns on the left. So 3 times what is going to give me a negative 12? That's 3 times negative 4. Each one of these must be a negative 4. Negative 4 plus negative 4 is negative 8, plus negative 4 is negative 12. Remember, when my signs are the same on the numbers, I just add them like I regularly do and take the sign of all the numbers. So on my answer, each of these is a negative 4. Now I have to move everything up and check by putting in the value of negative 4 for each of my blue pawns. Now I've got a 0 here, so I'm just going to take that off. Negative 4 plus negative 4 is negative 8, plus 2 is negative 10. Let's see if I get negative 10 over here. Negative 4, negative 8, negative 12, negative 16, negative 20. So here I have negative 20, and I'm going to add a positive 10 to negative 20. When I have positive 10 and negative 20, I am left with negative 10 as the whole quantity there. So it does check out. Negative 10 is equal to negative 10.